Good morning, everyone. Please take your seats. We're about to get started. Anyway, good morning, everyone. Welcome to your annual mayor's call. We're extremely excited to have you here. On behalf of the Washington State Board of Affairs and your Veteran Affairs Advisory Council, it is an honor to have you all here. Before we begin, you can all rise. Going to the pledge, please. You may always see it. Every year we have a talk about the state, the SOs, and our fellow partners, for how we can better the state affairs for veterans. But I would be remiss if I didn't point out the people who are making a lot of the changes. Some of you, most of you, are sitting in this room. So, with that said, I would like to start out with the introductions of our VSO commanders. And we'll do the VSO roll call. Those of you here with the Air Force Association. American Legion.
Present.
Thank you. AMVET. ASUA. Blue Star Families. DAV.
Present.
Love it, guys. E9 Association. Our Fleet Reserve Association. There we go. Marine Corps League. Here. I swear, Sarah, I said Marines. I hope you Sorry, Ron, I'll let those ones out. Military Officers Association of America. Here. Thank you. Military Order of the Purple Heart. NAVVETS.
Here.
National Guard Association. Yes. PVA. Special Forces. There's always one. VFW.
Here.
Vietnam Veterans of America. Women's Army Corps. Selfishly, 9-Line Veteran Services. Sorry, Aaron, Sarah, I know we were. And then for anyone else that we've missed, we thank you truly for all that you do in Team Services community. David and WDA were nice enough to bring coffee for a full veteran or something, so we appreciate that. And then lastly, before I turn it over to our amazing director, myself and our vice chair, Michelle Willis, have some awards we're going to be giving out. If we could call up right now, Mr. Ron Black, past back chair, and Mr. Bob Wallace, past back vice chair. Gentlemen, your commitment to service is unparalleled. Thank you for everything you've done for the state. now as he sits down. Sorry. I will turn. Sorry, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce your Director of your Washington State Department of Veteran Affairs, Mr. Difuente.
Good morning, everyone. How's everybody?
Good. Good.
Hopefully you all had a safe trip. We're all here, so it was uneventful. Because yesterday, a couple of us went to Seattle and it took us over 2 hours to hit north. It's always fun. It's always that time in the bracket when can you make it on time and when can't. So, thank you for being here and your commitment. Greatly appreciated. Sean and Shelley, I want to say thank you for your service and your continued leadership in the Veteran Affairs Advisory Committee and also the WAVAC as well. As we get started, what I want to do is just a quick introduction. We have a busy day. So this is the second go-around we wanted to do. Last year we started something different where we had breakout sessions where we wanted to listen to you all. I'll be talking a little bit about that. And today we're going to do something very similar. We're going to have 4 breakout sessions where we're going to talk about that and give you some time to be able to share and communicate with us. But so I don't want to take up a lot of time. We also have I'd like to do some overviews. But before that, I wanted to take an opportunity to invite 2 individuals. I know Shane is here, but Jim Priva. Jim is our Regional Outreach and Strategy Engagement Manager at the Governor's Office. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, or you want to say how great of a job we're doing, call him. And secondly, what I want to do is invite Shane Escobar, the Chief of Staff of the Governor's Office, to come up and do a quick introduction. Shane's my boss, but I wanted to give him a couple minutes to come up and meet all of you and the great individuals that work in this space that we work in. Shane?
Good morning, everybody, and it's great to be invited here. I'm able to meet you all, and want to just thank you for all that you do for our veterans community. I was sharing with the governor this morning that I was coming here, and he said, please extend my appreciation and gratitude to all of you for the great work that you do for our veterans. For all of you who have served, thank you for your service. I do want to, one of the things that the governor cares a lot about is veterans. He has many veterans in his family. His father, his grandfather, his great-grandfather all served in the military, and so he has a great appreciation for veterans and all of what you've done for our country and for democracy. We really appreciate that. I did want to just, we have a few minutes. If anybody had any questions or comments or concerns that you want to share with me that I can take back from the governor, I'm happy to open that up for a few minutes. If anybody has anything, if you want to be brave and stand up and tell me how we can do something better or questions that you have.
I know that you've been known for being shy.
There's one, right?
Is there somebody who wants to say?
I don't have questions, but I want to applaud WDVA for all that they do, the training that they give, because it helps us out in the field.
Great, great. You know, and I work with all of the directors for all of our cabinet agencies, and I think David is of all of those directors, whenever I meet with him, I can just tell what passion he has for this community. He's always advocating on your behalf. We are going through some really challenging budget times at the state level. But David's advocacy, I think, has really helped in shaping some of the things that we've done, investments that we're making in new facilities, cemetery, and some of those other things that we're looking at. That is really due in large part to David's advocacy on your behalf. And so I really do appreciate David and the passion that he brings to this work. I mean, Alfie was a hard person to follow, but I think David has measured up to Alfie and all that she did. So I appreciate David and really he does a great job for your community, just so you know. appreciate getting to be here with you all and just thanking you for your service.
Jim's going to come up and say a few words to you all about what he does.
Hey everyone, I'll make it really quick and just invite you to invite me to get involved in whatever you're doing. My job in the governor's office is to be on the road, make relationships, and find out where things are going really well and to highlight success and find out where there are problems and elevate those concerns to the governor's attention. In the last couple of years, I've spent Veterans Days, Parkland Post, for example, just get to know people. That's the kind of thing I'd love to do more of. So if you have any upcoming service events or upcoming programs, or if you just want to sit down and talk about something that's an issue for you or something that you think should have public or the governor's attention, please come get my business card. I'd love to spend some time with you and get to know you and your work. Thank you. That's all.
All right, good morning. Just want to make sure I'm following the schedule here. Sue, you can turn it on. And then I can navigate using this little thing here. Okay. So this morning, first, Shane and Jim, thank you very much for the kind words and also for your willingness to show up today, because I think it's important for our community to hear from the governor's office. So thank you very much. And as Shane stated, definitely there's a lot of support as we continue to do the work that we're doing. And this morning, what I wanted to do is just share a little bit about some of our priorities and things that we're going to be focusing on in the coming years. And then Solomon's going to come up and talk about budget. I know that important word that everybody wants to hear and see what's going on. So I'm going to share that with him. He'll be sharing some of those tidbits. For me, what I wanted to do is just kind of a quick overview of things that we have going on. So what you're looking at up there is our newest strategic plan. We just pushed it out recently. Kelly Hillman will be talking about that here in depth a little bit later this morning. But this is the newest version. We've updated. The things that I do want to share that did not change because of the work that we do and the importance is the mission and the vision. Those are two common denominators that will not change for the agency because that's who we are and what we do and the continuing work that we're going to continue to do for our transitioning service members, veterans, and their families. So those items did not change. The other things that are important on this are the 4 goals. So save and transform lives, respect, empower, and inspire everyone, be the leading state in veteran service delivery and outcomes, operate effectively and efficiently. So those are the goals that we're going to be focusing on. And under those goals, you'll see strategies and objectives that we'll talk about as we continue to have this conversation. The next slide here is, Shane mentioned this a little bit about the work that we have going on with our second state cemetery that we want to develop and build. We're looking at the Tri-Cities, so the area that circles are highlighted in yellow. That is an area that was identified by federal VA as an area of need for a state or a national cemetery. Federal VA is not going to build a national cemetery, so they gave us the information and we're going to be moving forward applying for cemetery grants to be able to develop and build a new state cemetery in that area. So what you can see in the things that are highlighted, it's a 75-mile radius that covers the area that the federal VA wants us to be focusing on and looking at. So you're looking at the southeastern section of Washington State and then part of northeast of Oregon as well. So it's that 75-mile radius where we're going to be potentially serving about 50,000 veterans. We're looking at potentially, on average, about 400 interments a year, but that's sort of an overview of what's going on with that work that we have going on. So, and keep in mind, we have a population in the state of Washington of about 500,000 veterans that we will be serving as well. There's only one other national cemetery in the Tahoma area, which is South King County. There are other federal cemeteries, but they're smaller in nature, and they're very limited to interments. So a lot of those areas are very limited to just cremation, so interments like that. So there aren't a lot of in-ground interments available aside from Tahoma. And then we have our state cemetery over in Medical Lake, which is just around the Spokane area. continue to have a little bit of more deep data on the cemetery is we worked a lot with our state legislature, elected officials, county individuals, county commissioners, and I do have to say that the Tri-Cities area has a committed community that's very supportive of this cemetery. There's a lot of work that's going on, a lot of passion behind it. I know for us, there's work that's being done to try to slow that down a little bit because we got to work through our process and go through those steps. But the Tri-Cities is very committed to developing and building this new state cemetery in that area. We've identified 200-acre parcels. One is owned by the city of West Richland. The second is owned by a private landowner in West Richland. Last cycle, the legislative cycle, the governor's office and the legislators were very supportive. They gave us $500,000 to do a pre-design study. I know Terry and his team are currently working on identifying a vendor. We're going to be starting that assessment and that review work sometime this month. We're hoping that that's going to be completed by April of 2026. So what's going on with that is they're taking a quick look, not quick, they're doing an in-depth look at those two parcels, the 200-acre parcels. We're going to identify which is best suited for this cemetery. Things that we're looking for is access, water, power, accessibility, landscape, architects, and also historical sites. So there's a lot of work that has to take place, prep work that has to take place before we start moving forward with all of this. And this assessment's going to help us do that in the coming months so that we can prepare and get ready. The next couple steps that we have that are going to be addressed are the capital request for the land purchase and off-site improvements. The caveat to that is the state is going to have to bear all of those costs. Federal VA, the grant, when we submit for that, they will pay for 90 to 100% of the development of the cemetery, and then they'll give us the keys and then we have to operate it. But all of the prep work, so for example, we're going to have to run power, light, sewer, septic, all of that prep work has to be done by us. So we're going to be going to the legislature asking for funding to be able to do that ahead of time so that we can get ready for the submission for the federal grant. Once we get that, we'll be able to execute the purchase and sell agreement for those properties. And again, there's a different dynamic with each one of them properties so far. So for example, the city of Richland has graciously agreed to donate that land to us. Nothing is for free though, because we have to do a lot of prep work that may require a spend of about $8 million at least, 8.5. So it's not free. We have to do all that work to do that, but we're not paying for the land, which is great. It's a great location. The second location is owned by a private landowner in West Richland, who happens to be a veteran as well. Again, those are some things that we're going to be looking at all of those same improvements and the cost for that. But I think that the assessment that's going to be done in the next 4 months, 4 to 5 months, is truly going to help us identify, one, what's the best location when we're looking at cost and everything else that's associated with all of those things. So once all that gets done, we will be submitting our federal grant to the National Cemetery Administration for the development and the building of that state cemetery. And again, normally they pay for 90%. The state has to find 10% seed money to get that grant going. Once the cemetery is developed and they hand us over the keys to the gate, they will reimburse us hopefully for that remaining 10%. So in essence, they will help us build 100% of that state cemetery. So I think that's a great thing. We're looking at a couple years down the road, but this is an important project, not only for the agency and veterans in the community, but also for the Tri-Cities. They're very committed to getting this going. The next project that we're going to be focusing on is the replacement of our Spokane Veteran Home. Yes, ma'am.
Before you go to the other slide, if you want me to wait until later for Q&A,
As long as it's a fairly quick question, I'm more than happy to answer it.
well, I never do anything quick, so I'll just go.
Then my response will be quick. You want to wait then?
I will.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. I will find you. Thank you. So the next slide talks about the replacement home, the replacement of our Spokane Veteran Home. First, I want to say thank you to the legislature because we were successful in getting $8 million to purchase the land that's been identified for us to build to replace our Spokane veteran home. So that is a huge thanks, and I just want a sense of gratitude for that, and also the governor's support for continuing to support the purchase of that land. So currently, some of the limitations that we have at the Spokane Veteran Home, for those that do not know, it's about 1.75 acres. In essence, it's a building, it's an old hospital and a parking lot. There really is very limited space, period, for storage, accessibility, livability, quality of life, health and safety, because that was one of the areas that really got impacted by COVID. Our staff did an amazing job during that period of time, but definitely because of the infrastructure of that building are some reasons why we're looking at replacing that home. So you can imagine an old hospital where you're having to share rooms with a curtain in the middle. So that's how our residents are currently living. They're sharing a room, there's a curtain in the middle, there's a lack of privacy. So what we're looking at doing is building and following the VA small house model. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we continue moving forward. So it's the other thing that's also impacted at the current location is we all know that our residents and their health issues and their comorbidities are increasing. We do not have memory care or dementia unit at this location at all. So we cannot continue to provide that level of service, I see you, that level of service at that location. The intent will be, once we build our new replacement facility, our intent is going to be to have at least 20 to 40 rooms in that location to be able to provide that level of care. Yes, sir.
What's the size of the new parcel?
Say again?
What's the size of the new parcel?
I will answer that here in the next slide, sir. Thank you for that question. You're getting very important, so thank you. I think the other thing that's going to be important about this location is currently our limitations is we have no outdoor space. Right now there's a patio, a small patio in the back. That's the outdoor space. So it's just concrete and that's what they have. There really is no accessibility, there's no trees, there's lack of everything. So I think you'll see here in the next slide, and this will answer your question about the size. So everything in green, the dark shaded and the light shaded, where we purchased, and we recently closed on this. We purchased about 42 acres of property to be able to build our replacement home. This is an amazing location. Another reason why it's an amazing location, it's about 3 blocks away from Federal, the Man Grant staff built the facility. So the VA-NC, the VA Medical Center, it's about 3 blocks away. I joke that we're probably going to get golf carts and be able to take our residents down the road from this. You know, but that's truly an ideal location for us because it's not only going to improve quality of life, safety and health, the accessibility to medical care. Those are things that we're going to definitely be able to take advantage of. The other things that are important for us that we were also concerned when we were looking at locations is where we're going to be able to keep our staff. Some of the areas that we were looking at were medical aid. That's a drive. And for those of you that lived over in Eastern Washington, in the winter, it can be tough. So we ended up finding this location, which is very ideal, not only for the location, but we're going to be able to keep our staff. We're going to be able to probably recruit more professionals that work in the general area that are going to want to come work and care for our veterans and participate in our ability to take care of our residents. The other thing is going to leave us in town in Spokane, in the city of Spokane, where a lot of our visitors and vendors and partners that we work with currently volunteer and they show up and participate. A lot of the things we can't do without our community. It's going to allow us to continue to do that and build additional partnerships when it comes to this. Not only because of the new facility, but because of the extra property that we're going to have. We're still going to try to figure out what does that look like and what we're going to be doing. So we're going to be continuing to work with the city. I know we and I have had a lot of conversations with the city of Spokane, the county of Spokane, Parks Department, and the advisory boards. They are very committed to this. And I know recently, for me, I was watching the levy that they had for Spokane for All, that part they're getting ready to develop. So this property that is south of that, if you're looking at just this map, south of it, it's White Merkle Sports Complex. The city of Spokane and the Parks Department are getting ready to develop. I believe they're going to add 10 new soccer fields, baseball fields, softball fields. And they're going to be doing a lot of work, which is going to help us and support the work that we're doing. And again, looking at this new built facility, the state has to, like I was talking about the cemetery, We have to do all of the prep work and the beginning work and bring all the power sewer, work with the cities and all those things. So those are additional costs that we're gonna be looking at. And the work that we've done ahead of time and the work that Terry and the team have done ahead of time with our vendors, the architect, and as you can look here, the next slide, we'll get into a little bit about the diagram of the facility. So here's the potential first diagram of what it could potentially look like, first design. We're looking at 120 beds, okay? 120 bed facility, and as I mentioned, 40 of those, 20 to 40, we want to do memory care. The center of this diagram is sort of the small house model, where most of the bulk of the work is being done in the center part. So you're looking at reception, administrative, central kitchen, maintenance, gathering space where folks can come and have a lot of meetings, or you can have meetings, but it's the core of the facility. And each one of those branches has the L shape will be 20 rooms. Each branch is 10 rooms, single rooms. It's going to be like a little studio apartment. Each room will have everything that they need, their own facilities, their own bathrooms, everything's going to be there for them, livable space, and each room, each location, each hallway, or each of the L shape will have sitting areas, dining areas to make it very livable. I mean, we've had a lot of conversations with our residents. Our residents have been involved and given us their ideas, their needs, their wants, and definitely there's a lot of wants about what that new replacement facility could look like. So there's been a lot of work that's been done. So this is just sort of that small house model that we're looking for building. Okay, so here's where we're at with the status. The good news is that, as I mentioned, for the cemetery and the cost, Big VA will pay 65% of the construction cost when it comes to build this facility. The state's gonna have to come up with 35%. We've already submitted our budget proposal asking for the funding, as you can see up here on the slide. We've also asked, we've already done the purchase, the $8 million that they passed this last cycle, and we've already purchased the property. So we're gonna be continuing to ask for continuing capital improvements. As I mentioned a little earlier, we have to run all the sewer, power lines, and work with the city to update the roads, update infrastructure, and do those kinds of things. The good part about it is, as I mentioned, the parts, the city passed the levy. They're gonna be doing a lot of work already. It's gonna require infrastructure, water, sewer, light. So we're gonna have conversations with them starting very soon so that we can partner with them to see if we can maybe share some costs versus us bearing everything when it comes to doing that similar work. Some other ideas that I wanted to share, and I know we've talked to the county as well. We've had conversation about what are we going to do with the existing home. Some ideas that we've had is we're also going to be considering the potential of having an adult day health care. So having adult day health care for veterans to allow families in the community, or for us to pick up a veteran, or for family members to drop them off in the morning, for us to provide that skill care for the day, and then in the afternoon have them be picked up, for us to take them back to the residence. So that's an idea. The other idea is to build a new transitional housing program over on the east side, on the east side, like we have over here on the west side, to help with our veterans without homes and that population. I know the city and the county have a large interest in that, so there's definitely some interest. So those are just some ideas, and then any other partnerships that the county, city, and local officials may have as a part of what we're going to be doing moving forward to continuing to serve our transitioning service members and veterans. So those are some projects that we're going to be focused on in the coming years. You know, when I say coming years, I'm hoping we get it done faster, but I also recognize we have a lot of work to do. But that is something that we're going to continue in, and as Shane mentioned, the governor is very supportive of these projects. So I think I'm going to turn it over to Solomon, where he's going to talk about that fun stuff and money.
All right, thank you, David. Okay, the fun stuff. Talk about the budget. So during the last legislative session, all state agencies were asked to provide budget reductions equaling 6% of their total budget. For us, for DVA, that amounted to about $3.2 million. These reductions include holding positions vacant, significantly reducing our travel, but that results in much less and fewer opportunities for our outreach in rural areas and how we can assist. It's tough, but as many as you know, we had to share these reductions with our 5 contracted services organizations who help us file claims for veterans for their VA disability claims and compensation. This legislative session also tacked on some additional reductions, which include a reduction in funding for all the staff who support the Military Transition Readiness Council. The work in this position is still required by the Executive Order 1901, so way back in 2019. So that's been really tough for us. But it doesn't stop the work that needs to be done, but we still are required to do it. But this provides a direct connection for our veterans and leadership in our state's military installations and offers a platform for the leaders to collaborate on issues and that are important not only to the state but also to the Department of Defense issues. An additional reduction of $861,000 in our Veteran Services and Counseling and Wellness program in both the current fiscal year and in the coming fiscal year 26, which was presumed to be an underspend in this year's budget, but was a bit misleading in that. And as a result, we've had to make some adjustment in other programs and to ensure that our programs can close in place. So again, very tough year, hard decisions this year. But this reduction of funds will result in about $100,000 annually decrease in both our counseling program, which provides free counseling through contracted service providers across the state, and $100,000 annual decrease to our Veterans Innovations Program, which provides emergency financial assistance to veterans. In our homes, in our nursing home programs, the legislator asked us that we increase our private pay rates by 8%, again, to generate revenue, for the state and remain viable. This, for 3 of our 4 nursing homes and have semi-private room rates, basically went from $355 per day to $407. So that was the increase that we had to make in that program in order for funds generation. These additional cuts the legislature took are having an impact on our direct services, as you can see. For example, we're holding positions vacant in our suicide prevention program, our incarcerated veterans program, and our veterans and state management program. We also had to reduce funding that's available for direct financial assistance through our Veterans Innovations Program. We're working to see if there's any action or things we can do to restore this funding in the upcoming legislative session. So again, the advocacy that David and I and the rest of the team are going to be doing this next session is going to be critical in trying to get there. But again, by no doubt, it's going to be tough sledding for us to get through this. But again, we can't do this without our partners here in the room. We're going to continue to tell the story on how much work we're doing through partnerships in the state, throughout the counties and communities. Again, we want to ensure that our partnership is strong here today to support veterans and their families and get them connected to the benefits that they've earned while in service. Again, this session starts in January, so stay tuned through our newsletter. Hopefully you all are signed up, or if you haven't signed up when you came in, please do so, because that's your connection to make sure that you're getting the most up-to-date information from us on the various projects and how things are going with us. So if you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out to us. So I'll pause there for questions on the budget update. Okay, I see one hand there, Sean.
Yes, sir. So will the offset that you guys are proposing and have put into play for fiscal year 25 and 26 sustain you through fiscal year 27?
Yes, as of right now, again, it's okay, so the question was, sorry, we didn't have a mic, was, will the budget reductions that we're taking, sustain us through the fiscal year 26, 27? So my answer to that is yes, and, we will be monitoring, monthly, right? Watching the budget, the projections, watching the budget forecast, working closely, right, to make sure that there's not any other cuts or reductions that we have to make in order to remain viable. But at this time, we're looking at a sustainable forecast for the agency and staying at the current levels that we're at.
Thank you, sir.
I have one more question here in fact. Yes, sir.
The reduction in the Veteran Service Organization contracts, is that specifically going to impact the state-funded VSOs and counties?
Okay, so if I heard your question correctly, the reductions to the veteran service organizations, does that impact the VSOs and the counties?
Yeah, they're funded by WDVA.
Yes, so that is correct, and again, we're going to be working with those organizations on what that looks like, and again, we've had some conversation with the organizations thus far, because, again, the cycle fiscal year started back in June, so, we did make notice on that to those organizations.
I guess it's kind of a follow-up question to that. I know in more rural areas, something I've commonly heard is concerned that the VSOs that are out there in those counties are very overwhelmed in terms of trying to help people. Is there still going to be an ability to try to get more support for those VSOs in more rural areas, places like Okanagan, for example, where those guys are just really overwhelmed because it's like one guy trying to handle so many people? With these reductions, there's still ability to get some added support for those areas?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, the question again is, are we going to be able to have more support or at least meet the need of the communities as those VSOs are overwhelmed in the rural areas? My answer to that is, and David and I have talked extensively about this, is that we're going to continue to advocate with the legislation on that exact thing, right? It's like, this is the need that we still have, so, and this is a real impact, so that is a real story that we will be sharing so that we can make sure that we're telling that story, because that is important. We do recognize that there is a crush on getting resources to those that we partner with in those areas for that. So we're going to continue that route to advocate for that need.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And one last, sorry. Oh, Hannah. Thanks, Sue.
What is it that we do to support it?
That's a fantastic question. Do you have about $3 million? No, just kidding. I would think you're not kidding. But I think the honest question and being transparent with that, and I love that question, right? Because oftentimes we're asking that question, what can we do for you? I think for us is when you're making your rounds during session or your legislator or your legislators in your districts, bring that up, right? Like, we need the resources and the advocacy, right? Is we're all speaking on the same page and on the same cadence of we do need resources for our veterans and families in our community. So I think that would be my ask on that, right? On what you can do for us and help with that. Yes, sir.
Based on the legislation that was signed last year, and I appreciate your work on this, for the VSOs and the counties, I just wanted to share with you that Gibson County Commissioners have approved a part-time VSO, certified VSO that will be trained by the WDVA for the county this fiscal year.
Amazing. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And before I turn it over to David to introduce the next speaker, I do want to recognize Chris Kuba. Chris, if you can stand up, please. So I will share, Chris has been on board for all but 3 days. So please be nice to him. But also, please stop by and shake hands with him. I'll be making some introductions, but we do appreciate Chris being on the team, filling that role, and being an integral part with the community here in that. So again, welcome, Chris, and that's my time. Thank you all, and I'll turn it back over to Dave. Thank you.
I think I probably have maybe 1 or 2 minutes left before I'm going to stay on time, but I want to add a little bit to the 3 questions that were asked. So about the county VSO, rural areas and the focus. You must be reading my talking points. The question is something I was going to share a little bit later, but since you asked, I think this last session, the legislature continues to fund the money that we need in order to provide those grants to the 5 veteran service organizations that we work with and partner with, who do all that VSO work throughout the state. Also, the county has given us funding to provide 6 counties for those positions in those counties to fund county veteran service officers. Last session, just because of the funding and the finance was tight, again, they're continuing to fund that need and that resource, and we recognize that. I will say things that I continue to do and will continue to do is I travel to meet with the county commissioners and each one of the county's veterans advisory boards to talk about this thing, because each one of them gets money, right, through millage and their taxes, but they all use it differently. So for me, I go around the state and share and tell stories, and I encourage them into what Matt and that county is doing over there about hiring their own county VSOs with some of that funding, because we all know that if we have county VSOs, they are going to bring back money into the counties, because the veterans and the individuals that live in those counties, you're going to spend that money in the county. So it's sort of that return on investment. So those are things that we continue to have. And Carol, to answer your question about what can you do and what should we be asking, the breakout sessions that we have, that I'll talk more about, I think you're going to have an opportunity to share some of those ideas and talk a little bit about that. But I do think what Solomon shared, it's important that as you have opportunities, when you're having these community meetings and our elected leaders show up, especially your counties, your cities, your local communities, those are the ones that can make and have an impact on the work that we're doing, because they make those decisions on where the county spends money. And if you get to see a state legislator, please, during those periods of time, or the federal representative, share what's going on in your community, because we do that all the time. Every time we have an opportunity to share, we advocate for those things, especially the information that you share with us, so that what we're going to hear about today, it's important so that we can get that data and be able to share that moving forward. Ma'am, did you have a question on the Spokane Veteran Home, or you want to meet with that later? I will come find you before the session is over with. Yes, ma'am. Okay. So next, so we can, yes, sir.
David, I just want to say we had Congresswoman Strickland come out and visit us. And what I provided her was the last 2 years of money that we brought into the community, the amount of claims we've done, and our success rate, which she was really impressed, because she says she has never seen that before. But that's what we're providing now to our congresswomen and our legislative folks, so they know exactly what we're doing.
So thank you for doing that, because I think that data and that conversation is extremely important when you get to have that face-to-face meeting. So thanks for doing that. I think now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Kelly. I know I saw her earlier. There she is in the back. She's going to continue on with the next session, and this is where we're going to talk a little bit more about our updated strategic plan and where our focus areas are going to be. So let's welcome Kelly.
Morning, everybody. Answer that question. Yes. Good morning, everybody. I've been asked to do a little bit of housekeeping before I dive into my spiel about the strategic plan. If you need the restroom, doors, and others that are working kind of to the right. And if we have an emergency, everybody go this way out these doors and the doors that came back. All right. So, as David said, I am Kelly Hillman. I am the Director of Strategy and Performance for your WDB. I get the privilege today of sharing with you about the huge work that the agency leadership team and operations. I think I might use the pad again. This better? Wow. Okay. I get to share with you information about the work that the leadership team and the operations leadership team of WDVA completed and conducted over the last 9.5 months. So beginning in January of this year, David and Solomon said it's time to update our strategic plan. Our current plan is expiring. A lot of information was gathered, and it was connected to the authorizing environments in which we operate. So federal information, state information, information from our partners and stakeholders, as well as evaluating the work that had been done over the last 3 years connected to the strategic plan for 2023 to 2026. The result of that work is an updated strategic plan for 26 to 29. I believe we're talking about 2029. I feel old all of a sudden. David shared with you earlier that there's some things about the strategic plan that stand, that remain. And the reason that they stand and they remain is because they work. We've heard from you all over the years that these foundational aspects of this plan are the right pieces of the foundation. And what are those? The mission, serving those who served. Our vision, our value statements, which we call the WDVA way. That's how we engage in the work that we do. And our core goals. Those things are not changing or being updated anyway. So what is changing? What's new? Through the evaluation and analyzing all of the information that was pulled together, we identified, connected to 4 goals, that the objectives and the strategies to engage in the next 3 years are where we're placing our efforts and refreshing, if you will. So why do I use the word refresh? You're going to see as you look at this one-pager, we call it, that many of these objectives and strategies are familiar. Why? Because it's work that we do every day. It's the work that we know our veterans need. So giving consideration to our authorizing environments and the constraints that we're facing, it made a whole ton of sense to not create a whole bunch of new stuff to add to the plate, but rather to focus on the things that we know we either A, must do, or B, are the right things to do in order to serve our veterans. And so today, what we're going to do when we break out is we're going to spend some time kind of looking deeper into those aspects of the strategic plan, the objectives and the strategies. I'd like to share a little bit of highlights about the plan, so kind of taking it just a tad bit deeper. You'll recognize that goals 1 and 3 are more externally focused on our veterans. Highlights about those things. It's a commitment to those who serve. The strategy is rooted in compassion, respect, accountability. Providing supportive housing that meets veterans and their families where they are. We restore a sense of safety, belonging, and opportunity. This is more than just housing. It's a commitment to rebuild lives, one veteran at a time. This is more than just care. It's about a life well lived. The strategy is person. We create spaces where people feel purposeful, connected, and fulfilled, not only improving the quality of their life. We affirm the value of every individual, because everyone deserves a life full of meaning and purpose. Also, reaching every veteran where they are. This strategy is about more than just expanding our reach. It's about ensuring equity, respect, meaningful connection. By embracing innovation and collaboration, we commit to leaving no veteran behind, building bridges to services, and support meeting veterans where they are. And for goals 2 and 4, this supports our veterans and is more internally focused inside of WVA, where a culture of anticipation and care thrives. It helps shift the mindset of responding to issues to preventing them. It's about knowing the people we serve and those we work with well enough to meet their needs with precision, empathy, and foresight. We will listen intentionally and act proactively. We don't just keep up, we lead with care. And then lastly, for goals 2 and 4, it's about accountability that drives success. Reinforcing our dedication to being a results-oriented organization. By leveraging performance tracking, we ensure our work is measurable, transparent, and changing to better serve those that depend on us. So today we're going to focus primarily on goals 1 and 3. When you move into your breakout sessions, we're going to focus on goals 1 and 3. Now, I'm going to invite Terry Westphal, Heidi Everett, and Steve Gill to talk to you a little bit more intentionally and deliberately about those areas. Heidi, are you first? Okay. Thank you, everyone.
My name is Heidi Everett, by the way. I'm the This is Heidi Everett, and I'm the Communications and Legislative Director here at Gore, Washington State. So as Kelly mentioned, goal 1 is to save and transform lives. And so the Women Veterans Breakout Group is aligning with goal 1. And the objective, I'm so sorry. And the objective that says our services support veterans and families. So you're going to see that not every program or function that we do within the agency is named directly in the strategic plan. If we did that, we'd need a whole lot more than this one page that we've got up there. But having said that, all of our programs and services align with at least one of the goals that we have. So there's a few strategies that are going to help us achieve the goal, and one is to collect and incorporate customer feedback into service delivery. So this strategy aligns very well with the work that the WVAC is doing, the Women Veteran Forums, and the community visits that are done throughout the state. So the forums have helped identify opportunities to enhance services and have provided information on what is working and where we have gaps. Other ideas for implementing this strategy are holding regular check-ins with partners in our network, like we're doing today, sharing updates, receiving feedback, and building relationships. We're also going to develop and implement a plan to collect and incorporate customer feedback in service delivery. So in the future, it's possible to see more opportunities for you to share your feedback with us following any interaction you have with the WVPA team. And today, I'm going to point out that on your tables, there are some QR codes to scan. We'd love to have feedback for this event today as well. So in addition, WDVA is focusing on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And these efforts are going to create
some focus groups that align with work being done by the Office of Equity and another state agency, Door Washington, which is focused on customer feedback across our state enterprise. So today, during the Women Veterans Breakout, we hope to hear more about how you think we can ensure our services support women veterans. Now I will turn to West Talk, who will hopefully have better luck with it than I did.
Let's see if I can get this thing to work a little bit better. Good morning, everybody. For you that don't know me, I'm Terry Westup. I'm the Chief Financial Officer here at your WDVA. What I'll talk about a little bit today is Goal 1, Objective 1.2, which is our capabilities address veterans, housing, security, and stability. And we're talking about security and stability with veterans. We're talking about those things such as employment, health care, support services that ensure veterans don't only maintain or obtain housing, but they're able to sustain it for the long term. So the Unhoused Veterans Breakout group that we'll have today does align with this goal and objective. So some of the things that we're doing in this area really talk about, the first thing is collaborating with the VA, such as the Veterans Health Administration, the VISNs, and the VAMCs, on opportunities for funding for new housing services, surveys existing grants and funding opportunities out there. That could be at the state, local, federal level as well. To fund emergency and transitional housing, provide overview of WDVA services, again, that outreach with legislators, and Joint Committee on Veterans and Military Affairs, and also participating in local groups such as the Veterans Housing Option Group meetings in Kitsap and Pierce County. So we know even in good budget times, it's really important that we partner in this area. We all have limited resources, not only with money, but people as well. So being able to work at the federal, local, state level, as well as with our VSOs, is going to be really critical. And the expertise as well, right? So that local area that have in this housing area. So that's going to be really vital for our success in ensuring that we're able to meet this objective. The second thing is the strategy is to invest in veterans homes, THP, and cemetery services. You heard David before talk about the replacement Spokane Veterans Home. So, and then the idea that potentially we'll have a transitional housing program right there in downtown Spokane. If anybody's been to the Spokane Veterans Home, it's right in downtown Spokane. It's an ideal location for transitional housing if we can make that happen. So not only that, but looking at other opportunities throughout the state. You know, we have transitional housing right now only in Ording and Port Orchard. There's a need everywhere. So the work that we can do to continue to look for those opportunities is going to be important. So today, for you that are participating in that breakout group, we're really looking forward to hearing your ideas, solutions, and other things that we can do to collectively meet the needs of veterans in this area. Thank you. I think I'm passing it over to Steve now. All right, Steve.
Good morning, everyone. This is one of those microphones you need to put into your mouth, apparently. Hopefully you all hear me. My name is Steve Gill. I'm the Veteran Services Administrator and Tribal Liaison with your Washington Department of Veterans Affairs. I am a U.S. Army veteran and first came to WDVA in 2001, so I've been doing this work for many years with veterans in our communities across the state, working with counties, working with Indian tribes, working with nonprofit organizations, including veteran service officers from the nonprofits, counties, Indian tribes, and our own employees who do that work. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Goal 3, specifically 3.2. So Goal 3, and I know the slides, the font's kind of small,
is to be the leading state in veteran service delivery and outcomes. That's goal 3. Goal 3.1 is really focused on the residents in our veterans' homes, the health and safety of the residents in our veterans' homes. We're going to talk about goal 3.2. So 3.2 is to ensure that veterans, transitioning service members, and their families have access to services and earned benefits. That's, we're getting specific and talking about community-focused work with veteran service organizations, with the county partners, with nonprofit partners, and we did briefly talk about veteran service officer work earlier. So there's a couple different strategies packed into that. So the first strategy is to connect to benefits. This really aligns with this, well, I should say connecting veterans to benefits really aligns with the strategies of leveraging federal and other partnerships to align agency priorities. Our suicide prevention program and our Staff Sergeant Fox grant that focuses on suicide prevention. The training and the community work that they do really align well with the strategy of identifying innovative ways to reach rural veterans and underserved veterans populations. And we have some internal goals. So I talked about the external goals of working with partners to leverage resources and aligning priorities, and our Staff Sergeant Fox suicide prevention program, and including our other counseling and wellness programs like our counseling program, looking at innovative ways to serve rural and underserved veterans. We have some internal work as well as part of those strategies. And that consists looking at data, how we model data to visualize the veterans population, where veterans are located, where they need to be served, the demographics of that veteran population, and then looking to create an internal outreach focus group to help us identify our strategies, our performance measures, our outputs, our outcomes of doing that outreach. And to collect feedback internally. We heard earlier about collecting feedback externally. This type of event is part of that effort. But we also need to hear from our outreach staff and our veteran service officers who are on the front lines to get their feedback. So that we can look at developing the next step, an external service provider roundtable. So our veteran service organization partners, our county partners, our tribal partners can give us feedback on that effort as well. And that's going to be separate than the town halls that the Governor's Veterans Affairs Advisory Committee are already doing, or events like this. So these different strategies, support the objectives, support the goal of ensuring that veterans, service members, veterans, and their families have access to these benefits. You all are instrumental to that work, and so we wanted to talk about that as part of the breakout groups today. 2 of the 4 breakout groups we're doing are going to include these topics, and you get to pick where you want to align your work and where you want to participate, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Checking on time, I think we've got maybe 2 minutes before the next scheduled thing, and I begin to talk. So I'm going to take these 2 minutes to acknowledge our Governor's Veterans Affairs Advisory Committee. So if you are on that advisory committee, can you please stand up so that the members can see who you are? These are the individuals that are appointed by the Governor's office that help represent the state veterans, family members, transitioning service members. So get to know them. We talk to them often. They work a lot with us, and we get a lot of feedback from them. So these are the individuals that are representing you and your community. So the chair is Sean. He's directly in front of me. There we go. And then secondly, I'd like to acknowledge our Women's Veterans Advisory Committee. If you are part of that committee, can you please stand up? These amazing veterans are, again, representing the agencies as well. The chair is Jules. So those are the 2 individuals that are currently leading both of those committees. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or do you have an interest, go say hi. Okay. So what I want to do next is talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing and why we're here. So as I mentioned earlier, we're going to have breakout sessions. This is the second year we're doing this and trying this, so we do ask for feedback. I think Heidi mentioned the QR code that's right there in front of you, so please scan that, because your feedback is extremely important to us as we continue to evaluate this and see what it is that we need to be working on and focusing on as we continue to do this amazing work. So what I want to do before we talk about what we're going to do today is I want to do a quick review of what we talked about last year. So if you recall, last year we had, I believe there was 4 or 5 topics that we wanted to talk about. One is increasing access to accredited BSOs. So to share a little bit about what we heard, what we're doing, is we currently have partnerships with 23 of the 39 counties in the state here that we work with currently right now. We also have 11 agreements with Indian tribes that are supporting both county and tribal veteran service officers throughout the state. So Steve and the agency has done a great job of increasing the number of partnerships that we have with our Indian tribes. So we continue to do that. Also, your WZBA is the accrediting body for all of our veteran service officers in the state, and we also provide training. It's the same accreditation that our state employees have that are doing very similar work. The legislature, as I mentioned, continues to fund the VSO work that we have ongoing. We've also been able to fund 6 county veteran service officers and help those counties pay for those positions. And also, we receive ongoing funding so that we can have our contracts with our 5 large veteran service organizations that are doing the VSO work across the state. So I know there was a question earlier about funding for that. I do want to make sure that when we did the reduction exercise, that was an area where those contracts were impacted as well. So we had to reduce those by 6%. They did get impacted, so as we all know, that just means that we're serving less veterans around the state. But we're still continuing to focus on that work because it is truly important. Yes, sir.
Can you name those 5 organizations?
You're going to test me right now. So I'm going to reach out to Steve. I know it is the American Legion, the VFW, the Vietnam Veterans of America. I'm looking at Phil, so NAMBLA? NAVVETS?
National Association of Black Veterans.
There you go, National Association of Black Veterans, and then there's one more.
African American PTSD Association.
Okay. So that gave you like a 90% rating.
Thank you.
The other thing that we were talking about is the next breakout session that we had is the need to lift the stigma of suicide. So what our suicide prevention team has done is they've created a WDDA stigma training that they're doing alongside when they're doing the LEARN training. We also have the Governor's Challenge that we're a co-leader on that as well. And that group has developed WISER training, and I don't know the acronym, so don't ask me that question. That is going to be talked more about in the breakout session, so you'll be able to hear more of that coming up. The next topic that we talked about is outreach in rural areas, focusing on relationship and grassroots partnership. That was one of the questions that we got a little earlier. So we're continuing to do a lot of work on that. And a reason that I introduced both the Veterans Affairs Advisory Committee and the Women's Veterans Affairs Advisory Committee is those 2 committees do a lot of that work in this specific area. And I'll share a little bit more about that in a second. So those 2 groups focus a lot on the outreach that we have going on in rural communities in the state. And also our outreach staff are truly focusing on the rural areas. Where do we need to be having engagements and conversations as we continue to do this work? The next topic that we talked about last year was the linkage and cross-partner awareness and understanding of resources, services, and the work that's going on within our communities. So on this one, I think I think for those of you that attended the Serving Those Who Serve conference that we recently had a couple months ago, that is an area where we take advantage of doing that, building these relationships, understanding the work that's going on in the community so that we can all know who to call, right? Phone a friend. So who do we reach out to? Who's doing the work? Do we need to be doing duplicative work? Or who can I reach out to where we can use our resources a little bit better? So that is an area that we continue to focus on. And then the last section that we talked about last year was the VSO veteran cultural competency. A little bit understanding about the diverse veteran populations. So on this one, what our veterans, so what we're going to be focusing on this section this year is moving forward is we've developed a VSO community of practice. So we're going to be doing webinars every quarter where all of you and our veteran service officers throughout the state are being invited to attend where we can talk about best practices. I know as I travel around the state, Spokane County does great work in what they're doing, so we're going to be sharing best practices with each other to learn more about that. I know Tyler's going to be doing some work on that and focusing on the quality work that we're doing. As a state, we're doing great work. We want to make sure that every time we submit a disability or pension claim, that we're getting a high return on our investment, that we're getting a high acceptance rate. So those are things that we're going to be focusing on and talking a little bit about that. A little bit ago, I shared about the Veterans Affairs Advisory Committee and the Women's Veterans Affairs Advisory Committee. So I want to talk a little bit about what we're doing with those committees. As I mentioned, one of the big focuses that we're doing this past year is town hall meetings. These two committees, as we travel around the state, the areas to have our town hall meetings in rural communities where we can connect, like Okanagan. We had a meeting up there this year. We have an opportunity to travel, and a day before the actual town hall meeting, we're meeting with community partners. State organizations, local organizations, nonprofits, community partners that want to come and have a conversation with us so that we can learn what's going on, so that we can listen to what transitioning service members, veterans, and their families are asking for. What are their needs? What are their wants? What are areas that they want us to focus on? And then what are those communities doing? And the great work that how we can partner with them. How can we become better partners with our community partners as well? So we take that day in advance of the town hall and spend that with community, and then we have the town hall meeting where we do something like this. We share information, we invite all of our community partners, we invite federal VA to come in and talk, because a lot of the questions that we get are about the work that's being done by our federal partners. And I want to say thank you to them because they continue to show up. It's important, Larry's here, it's important that we continue to have that work and the partnership with them, because we're not going to be able to do it alone, specifically with all of the challenges that we're going to have as we continue to work in these tough budget times. I do want to say that the meetings that we held this last year, there were in Ainu County, Walla Walla County, Pacific County, Benton County. I know the committee has worked on where we're going to go next year. I don't remember those yet. But we've already scheduled the future meetings, and what we're trying to do is make sure that we're going to the locations or cities and areas where we can have an impact, where we have a high number of veterans, rural communities, areas that we have not been to in a couple of years, so that we can continue to learn more about what's going on. So today, why are we here? So today we're going to talk about 4 topics. The town hall meetings that we had, we collected that data and we identified 4 topic areas that they spoke to us about. And these are the 4 areas that we want to talk about today with you, so that we can kind of figure out what are we doing, what's working, and what's not. I think most of you, if not all of you, received the questionnaire. I hope you read it, studied it, worked on your homework so that we can have really great community conversations today. Today what we're going to be focusing on is homelessness and housing, women veterans, suicide prevention, and connecting veterans and families to their earned benefits. So what we want to listen to is what's working, what's not, what are areas that we want to be focusing on. Because I know I've talked about the challenging times that we're going to be facing here as the new legislative cycle starts, is money's going to be tight. So we're going to be advocating to maintain what we have, and also advocating for what we're asking for. And then each group has been assigned a facilitator and note taker. Let me go to the agenda, and I believe those are on there. So the suicide prevention is directly behind me. They're going to be meeting directly behind me, and Nicole raised her hand. She's going to be the facilitator, and then our note taker is Eric. Unhoused veterans, back here to my front left, to your rear. Melissa is going to be the facilitator. Melissa, where are you? There she is. And then Jennifer is going to be our note taker. Connecting veterans and families to their earned benefit is to my right. So we have Steve that's going to be the facilitator. Rick will be our note taker. Women veterans are going to be to my left, back here in the back. Crystal Schindlein is going to be our facilitator. And Kelly will be our note taker. So those are the 4 breakout groups, and I believe all of you have kind of self-selected of where you want to go. We tried to have the largest group signed up in one of the larger rooms to ensure that we have space available as we continue to do this work. I want to make sure that I've covered everything that I need to be sharing. All right, so we have any questions before we get going into our breakout sessions? Our intent is once we end the breakout sessions, the facilitators are going to help and do a voluntold, or one of you is going to stand up and speak up to be the spokesperson. We want to get a summary of the conversation, and then Solomon and I will wrap up our morning and early afternoon. Anything else? Am I missing anything, Kelly, team, Heidi? No? All right, so as we move out to our sessions, grab coffee, water, pastry, or thank you.
All right, thank you everyone for joining us live. We will take a brief pause during our breakout session conversations and circle back for the recap and briefing for those breakout session topics. Thank you again for everyone for joining us, and please feel free to join us in about an hour's time when we'll circle back in for discussions of the breakout group topics. Thank you very much.